It is 9:30. I think we are probably going live right now. And so I imagine some folks will still join after we get started. But I want to thank everyone who's here for coming. Oh, I am hearing feedback. I'm sorry. Hold on, everybody. No, that's better. I'm sorry. Oh, no, oh my gosh. I am getting my own feedback like from the recording. Oh, that's better now. Sorry, everyone. That was very distracting. And so if Zach or anyone, Melissa, if you have any recommendations for how I can not hear myself talking.
I don't know, Matt. We're not hearing it. We're not hearing it on. Yeah.
That is bizarre. Wow. I am almost going to just, okay.
Hey, Matt, do you have the live stream window open where it's live streaming too?
Right.
Okay,
no,
that would
exactly
be where
what I was thinking.
Okay.
Thank you, Melissa. That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm tempted to take these. No.
I think you have some river otters playing some tricks on you.
I think you're right, Joe. Audio. I'm going to see if I can. Oh, maybe if I mute my audio. All right. Can folks still see me and hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
I've got it now. I'm not going to be able to hear any of you talking. So if any of you are talking, I've got you muted. I'm sorry about that, everyone. Technical glitches. Wouldn't be Zoom if it weren't for it. So welcome, everyone, to the 21st Annual St. Joseph River Basin Symposium. My name's Matt Meersman. I serve as the director of the St. Joe River Basin Commission, who's sponsoring this event. I also volunteer with a group called the Friends of the St. Joe River Association. I've been doing watershed management stuff for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And what I mean by that, watershed management, of course, we got to start there. I'm using the dirty word of watershed, which not everyone knows. We're just talking about all the land that drains to the St. Joe River in this case. And the reason we talk about watersheds, the reason we do watershed management is it turns out if you care about the water in a river, a stream, a lake, if you care about that water, you got to look at the land that's draining to it. It's the land that's draining to it that's going to make a difference when it comes to quality and quantity issues. So we become very interested in all this land, this 5,000 square miles of land that are draining to the St. Joe River, if we want to have an impact on water quality and flooding issues. So I want to go through a couple of just business items, housekeeping. Those of you who joined early have heard of this stuff a bunch of times, but one of the initial purposes of the symposium was to provide a networking opportunity to bring folks together from Michigan and Indiana. The commission itself is an agency of the state of Indiana, so a lot of our business and our board certainly and our funding comes off from the Indiana side of things. So we tend to get kind of focused on that, and this event was created 21 years ago to try to bring together Michigan and Indiana on these things. And we've been limited with COVID last year, and hopefully we're on our way out of that, and we'll be able to get back to having lunch together in a beautiful place and lots of breaks with opportunities for networking, which is traditionally how this event has gone. So we're limited this year with this virtual technology, but hopefully in the last year, a lot of us have gotten better at it. And one of the things that I'm going to encourage you all to do is to use the chat feature to communicate with each other. I love that lots of folks are sharing their screen right now. You've got a little button up in the upper right-hand corner that allows you to change your view. If you're only seeing me, I'm really sorry about that because there are a lot more pretty faces on this call than mine. So I encourage you to go up there, turn on the gallery view, get a sense of who's all on this call. If you can't see, one of the other options you can do is to click on the participants window. And I would encourage you to do that anyway, because there's a lot of helpful information in there about who's with us and who they're affiliated with. So one of the things you can do if you open that participants window and you see yourself in there, if you haven't added any information, adding your full name to start would be helpful. And then add who you're affiliated with afterwards. That'll give us all a sense of who's here. And it will allow us to communicate directly with some of those people. If you click on anyone else's name, you should get a chat window that opens up and allow you to send a direct message right to that person. So definitely encouraging everybody to use the chat feature to do some form of virtual networking. Certainly while I'm talking, you don't need to pay attention. I'm not going to say anything important. Once our presenters start, you can make funny comments about them to your friend if you want, but in the meantime, I encourage you all to catch up, use the chat feature to talk to each other. So I am going to ask everybody to remain muted. We've got a ton of people on the call. I love that so many people are sharing their faces. It's going to help us put a name to a face. And I will ask you to keep those open. Let us see you at least until Marcy gets started with her presentation. I'm going to talk for a little bit here this morning. I'm going to introduce one of my newest friends. And then after Kate speaks, I'm going to turn it over to Marcy. And then we're going to wrap up today with Daragh, and we'll take questions sort of afterwards. Now, you are encouraged to share your question in the chat. And if one of us who are monitoring that, and if you want to send it to the whole group, there may be someone else in the room that can answer your question. But we will try to pick a few questions at the end if we have time to sort of address that might be helpful for everyone to hear. So with that, I might add, I get comments a lot of times about you being so passionate about this stuff. And for those of you who don't know me, that passion for this work comes from a love of being on and in the river or the lake. I grew up going into a lake cottage about 2 hours away from here. I'm standing in South Bend, Indiana. This is not a virtual background. This is the real thing. So I might get attacked by a goose this morning. We might have a dump truck come up and make a bunch of noise. We'll do our best. Once the presentations get started, I'll be muting and moving inside. But I'm out on this river at least 5 days a week. I'm paddling on it. Sometimes when I tip over, I'm swimming in it. It happens. I play down at the East Race. We got this little whitewater thing. So I have a lot of fun on the water and in the water. And it's that desire to be able to keep doing that and enjoy it that makes me want to protect it, makes me want to make it cleaner and healthier. So that's a little bit about me. I mentioned the purpose of the symposium, bringing folks together, and the limitations of this virtual meeting. We have a really impressive list of folks who are here. Those who are just watching the live stream are not going to be able to see this, but I love that so many of you are sharing your video. And for those of us who are on the Zoom call, I'm going to just rattle off, because those folks on the live stream aren't able to see who all we got here, but I'm going to rattle off some names and some organizations we have represented. If you got here early, you may have heard me welcoming a lot of these folks who joined us, but we've got, I'm basing off of who signed up. So if someone is sleeping in and they didn't make it, it is possible that this person is not here. And you are free to rouse to them about that. But they said they would be here. So to start with, we got a lot of great agency folks, both sides of the line. We got Matt Diana from the Michigan DNR, Fisheries guy, and got Rod Edgell from Indiana DNR. I know we have a couple people, Jen Thumb, and a couple folks from the Indiana State Department of Ag, Christy Todd from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, but lots of folks from state agencies that are here. We also have, which is really incredible, some drainage officials here. I mentioned earlier that something like 75% of the streams or waterways that flow to the St. Joe are managed as regulated drains of some kind. And that means they're a public ditch, and that means the authority of management of that lies in the hands of an elected official. In Michigan, it's called the Drain Commissioner. In Indiana, it's called the County Surveyor. And we've got some with us here today. I know Chris Quatrin's here from Berrien County. Mike Ruff was supposed to be here. I hope you're here, Mike, from Steuben County. Zach Holsinger, the surveyor over in LaGrange County, as well as Steve Vaughn. John Law, I know, is here from St. Joe County Surveyor's Office. So we got a lot of folks in drainage, which is great.
Hey, Matt, somehow you muted yourself, if you can hear me.
Sorry, everybody. I don't know where you lost me. But
you were talking about people from the drainage,
muted, but maybe somebody unmuted me. I'm going to unmute myself. Gotcha. All right. Well, I am back, and I'm going to remute. All right. All right. I am just muted myself again because, of course, the feedback's still going on in my ears. And I was mentioning the drainage officials that we have with us. Hopefully, you all heard that. I started transitioning to sorry, my wife was kind enough to scream out the front window that I was muted. She's obviously watching on the live stream. Thank you, Danielle. I think they can now. Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. This is real. So We've got some amazing Native American tribes here in the watershed that are doing a lot of work with us. I know Eric Kearney from the Natawa Huron Band, as well as Grant Poole and Jennifer Canine from the Kayaking Band. We've done a lot of work with them. They should be here today. We got federal agency, Army Corps of Engineers, Rebecca Hartman. I mentioned earlier, State Senator Sue Glick, who's been such a great ally on wetland issues recently. She's here with us today. Lots of folks from lake associations. We got some farmers from Buchanan. We got municipal officials, Dwight Fish from the City of Elkhart, Mary Kripe from town of Middlebury. We got county commissioners here with us, Pete Cook from LaGrange, Daragh Deegan from St. Joe County, and up in Michigan, we got Linda Preston here from Pokagon Township. Everything happens at the township level up in Michigan, so it's a little different than all the county business that we've got here in Indiana. Lots of conservation clubs and groups. Trout Unlimited, I know Sue Stuckman's here from the Elkhart Conservation Club. Alicia Walsh is here from the health department, representing my health department friends. Jeff and Annie from the Environmental Center over in Elkhart. I know Peg Coring is here from the Conservation Fund. Lots of folks from academia. I know John Schramm, Tom Hartzell from Goshen College, Krista Bailey from IUSB, Wayne from Kalamazoo Valley Community College, Chris Temple I know is here from Notre Dame. Lots of folks, consultants and engineers, planners. We got those folks here. Cardno, Burke, Waterways, Lawson Fisher. Lots of folks who are helping our municipalities, and some of us organizations do some good things out there. Of course, we've got watershed groups. I mentioned lake associations, but we've also got a lot of representatives like myself and several of us who wear multiple hats. Friends of the St. Joe River. I know Kevin Haight, Two Rivers Coalition. Meanders is a group dedicated to the Dowagiac River, which we're going to be hearing about. I know there's several Meanders members here. So great to see so many folks who, just as volunteers get involved in this kind of stuff. Parks and Recreation Department's definitely got folks, Rhonda and some of her staff from Elkhart County, Shelley Chaffee's here from St. Joe County, Tom Enright from Middlebury, Jill DeLucia from Niles Township Parks is here. So I think Aaron Perry from South Bend. So lots of folks from Parks and Rec. And, Public Works, engineering, stormwater, wastewater, lots of folks. Gary Gillot, Lynn Brayback, Joe Foy, Mike Macklin, folks from the City of Elkhart, Jason Kaufman from City of Goshen, Kieran Fahey, Adam Bowden and Carl Kopek from Mishawaka. So lots of folks, that's the point. And I know that for many of you, you can look on the participants list, but for those who are unable to see that, I think it's really important. And beyond all these organizations I mentioned, there's a lot of folks who are just riparian landowners, just citizens that are interested in this watershed management stuff. They're here with us today as well. So with that, I'm going to stop name dropping and try to get into this next thing that I want to do, which is sort of different. And I don't know if I'm going to have time for it, but I'm going to start. I'm going to try. And what that is well, first, let me start with a story. There's a really exciting documentary coming out about the St. Joe River, and I'm super pumped up about it. It's supposed to come out in August or September of this summer on the local PBS station, WNIT. They've been working on it. It's going to be really cool, and I've been interviewed a couple times for it, and I've been helping them with maps and information. And the producers of that documentary asked me this right early on. One of the first calls I had with them is, what's some of the best parts of the St. Joe? And that question struck me that some of the best parts of the St. Joe aren't even called the St. Joe. It's really this watershed concept that all these lakes and streams, this whole 5,000 square miles of land that drain to the St. Joe is some of the best parts of this thing. We've got close to 1 million people that live on land that drains to the St. Joe. We've got 15 counties that drain to the St. Joe. It's just incredible. So I think of the river itself as all these lakes and streams that flow to it. And normally the way I would handle trying to convey that information is by sharing a map. I mean, last year at the symposium, I had this map of the watershed. It shows this is where all the land that drains to the river. And that would be a lot more efficient way to show what's draining to the river than what I'm about to try. But today I want to try and use words. I want to talk to you about what the St. Joe is and think about it from this water standpoint. And we got to start at the end. We're going to start where it's all going, down at the mouth in Berrien County, in St. Joe Benton Harbor, where this river meets Lake Michigan. It's the third largest tributary of Lake Michigan, draining these two states. And if we start there and we start working our way up, we don't even go a half a mile. and we meet the confluence of the Pawpaw River. And it's at the Pawpaw River that we've got this amazing stream coming in from the north that extends along I-94 all the way over to Kalamazoo. And it's got this incredible forested floodplain corridor, you know, talking about creating connections and cool projects going on. We've had dam removals that have taken place on the Pawpaw, wetland restoration, working with farmers to test controlled tile drainage and how they manage their land, you know, all kinds of incredible things happen in that Pawpaw. And if you come back with me, it was going all the way up to Kalamazoo, but come back to the main stem with me. You're still in St. Joe Benton Harbor. And we start moving upstream, which in the case of the St. Joe, we're moving south as we move upstream. We're moving through Berrien County and we're going through the town of Berrien Springs. And all of a sudden we come to Niles. We're almost to Indiana, but we get to Niles where we got the Dowagiac River joining, you know, which is like the third or fourth largest tributary. And we're going to hear all about the Dowagiac later. Talk about creating connections. There's amazing things happening there, way beyond just the dam removal that Marcy's going to focus on. So, you know, major tributary coming in from the east side. And then we cross the state line and you get to where I am here, to the south bend of the St. Joe. If you think about this path that the river, the main stem of the St. Joe is found, it's a big arc, heads south, kicks over to the east and then to the north. So here in South Bend is the furthest point on the main stem of the river that you can be and be on the St. Joe, as far south as you could be. And that's where I'm standing here today, on the south bend of the river. And as you approach this, you're moving your way upstream, you come by a pretty cool little tributary called Jude Creek. It's one of the few cool and cold water streams in Indiana. It's had some incredible projects done over the years. Lunker structures, fish habitat, remeandering, all kinds of cool stuff have been done on Jude Creek. And we got one cool one coming up. John Law from St. Joe County Drainage Board shared with me that we're going to be doing a 2-stage ditch project in some of the headwaters of Jude Creek, which is basically trying to reconnect the floodplain of this ditch. Really cool stuff. Allows the stream to be healthier, hopefully allows the county to save some money. So really cool things happening in Jude Creek. And you know, for those of you who are somewhat local or even from far away, shopping gets done on Grape and Main Street in Mishawaka. There's this giant commercial corridor out there. Well, that's the part of the watershed that's drained into Jude Creek. And there's been incredible stormwater practices implemented up there that are really helping to protect the creek. So that's home to me. I saw a little more focus on it, but let's keep moving upstream. Come back here, South Bend. We're off of Jude Creek. We're heading east. At this point, the river's going to parallel the Indiana Toll Road, essentially. We're heading east, and we don't go very far to where we reach the county line with Elkhart. And here comes, from the south, our first big stream from the south, Boggo Creek. Oh boy, Boggo Creek has been hammered over the years. Boggo Creek has been drained. We got some great ag land out there, but we have lost all our wetlands, and we need to create some connections there in Boggo Creek. So back to the river with me. We're going east further. We get to the city of Elkhart. City of Elkhart is where we get our biggest tributary, the big one. We're going to hear about it later. It's the Elkhart River. The Elkhart River essentially drains most of the Indiana portion of the St. Joe Basin. We're going to hear about, you know, what it's like in the city of Elkhart, but you don't have to go much further upstream. Let's travel up the Elkhart. We're heading south now. We get to the city of Goshen. Some really cool stuff happening in Goshen from a stormwater side, creating connections. But I'm gonna kick us off at a big tributary that comes in right there in Goshen. That's Turkey Creek. Turkey Creek's going to take us even further to the south into Kosciuszko County to Lake Wawasee. Lake Wawasee is the biggest lake in the whole basin, Indiana or Michigan. And there is some really cool stuff creating connections on Lake Wawasee. They're studying all the inlets to determine how much sediment and nutrients coming out of each stream that feeds Lake Wawasee, working with farmers upstream to do practices. So really cool stuff happening on Turkey Creek, the headwaters up there, and Lake Wawasee. Okay, come back with me to Goshen. We're back on the Elkhart. Now we're moving a little bit more to the east as we move south, and we're going up to Ligonier, where the north and south branches of the Elkhart come together. Now, on the way, we've passed by Boehnertown and Benton and a few dams that are there that Rhonda from the Parks Department knows about, and who knows, maybe we'll get those things out of there here soon. I hear rumors. So we get up over those dams if we can jump real high or if we can paddle really fast, and we start moving past Ligonier. We got a choice, north-south branch. We're going to start with the north. It's the big one as far as I'm concerned. Sorry if anybody's here from the south branch of the Elkhart, but the north has got some major connections it's creating and it's in need of. We got folks from the West Lakes Association. So the north branch of the Elkhart drains a whole bunch of lakes, tons of lakes. The West Lakes in Noble County actually drains pretty much the entire portion of Noble County that comes this way, which is big. Done some really cool projects around flood mitigation. We've got a ton of water down there, a lot of groundwater A lot of wetlands intact still. North branch of the Elkhart drains a big chunk of LaGrange County and goes all the way up to Bixler Lake in the city of Kendallville. So, you know, we're as far east and south as you can be. It's a 2-hour trip for me to get there. And that water's coming here to St. Joe through Ligonier, through Goshen, and eventually here to me in South Bend. So, all right, come back to Ligonier, Confluence, South Branch. You know, you've got some lakes and stuff down there. You've got the city of Albion, the county seat of Noble County, and the chain of lakes down there. And Elkhart, that's it. I'm gonna stop there because I've only got 5 minutes left, and I'm gonna bring you all the way back to the city of Elkhart. We're gonna keep moving upstream, okay? And we don't go very far before we have pretty much hit it for Indiana. That's about all there is. We're getting to Bristol. Bristol, we got the little Elkhart River coming in there. Drains a big chunk of LaGrange County. We've done some really cool stuff with livestock and getting them out of the river, studying the impact of livestock in the river and all that kind of stuff. Cool things in the past in the Little Elkhart. Okay, back to Bristol. We're on the main stem, and now it's time to go to Michigan. So the river kicks to the north, goes under the toll road, going up into Michigan, and immediately we're joined by the 3rd largest tributary of the St. Joe. That's the Pigeon River. Pigeon River drains a big chunk of northern Indiana and a little bit of southern Michigan through White Pigeon. But it goes all the way east over to the city of Angola, just south of that, the Pigeon Creek, Hogback Lake. I mean, we got Steuben County Lakes Council here, all kinds of lakes coming through the Pigeon River, as well as a big chunk of LaGrange County. Okay, but back to the St. Joe. We're still moving north. We don't get much further, and we hit the village of Constantine, where one of my favorite tributaries comes in. That's the Fawn River. The Fawn River acts like a thread that stitches Indiana and Michigan together, pretty much parallels the state line, weaving itself in and out of Indiana and Michigan. Some incredible work's being done on the Fawn around recreational access, bringing more people to the river, creating these connections between people and the water. Okay, back to the river. We're in Constantine. We got to go a little further before we get to the city of Three Rivers. This is where it all comes together. This is about the halfway point if you're working your way from the mouth like I am. But trust me, we're more than halfway in my talk. We get to Three Rivers, which should actually be called Four Rivers because it starts with one that meets just south of town. That's the Prairie River. Incredible things going on in the Prairie Rivers, coming in from the east, and it's draining the seed corn capital of the world. You know, tons of seed corn out there, lots of irrigation. And so we're doing these intensive studies to determine the impact of groundwater withdrawal on the river. How is this sucking up water from these wells impacting the river and what lives in it? Okay, back on the St. Joe, we're in the city of Three Rivers. We got two more to talk about right away. First one's the Rocky River. For those who were here early, we talked about the Rocky River. It extends all the way up into Van Buren County. So I like to tell my friends in Van Buren County that, hey, part of your water is coming all the way to me in Indiana. Even though you're up there in Van Buren County, you're only maybe 40 miles from Lake Michigan as the crow flies. But that water up there is coming about 150 miles to make its way to Lake Michigan, and that's through Indiana. Great things with recreation on the Rocky River. Now move just one river over. So again, coming in from the north, following 131 is the Portage River. This is basically draining the south side of Kalamazoo. And incredible resource and some great lakes on the Portage River. There's a dam removal project coming up on the Portage River, the Parkville Dam removal. So great things happening on the Portage. Okay, we're back on the main stem in Three Rivers, and I've got 2 minutes and I'm gonna finish this. And so we move up to the kind of northeast following M60 out of town here, and we come to Mendon. And just upstream of Mendon is where another one of my favorite tributaries, the Natawa Creek. This is where the river gets its name. The native name, Nottawaseebee, is the name of this river. Natawa Creek speaks to me, and it speaks to others. It's an incredible stream that starts all the way on the other side of I-69, south of Marshall, Michigan, and comes through the Nottawaseppee Huron Band's property through Pine Creek. And there's wild rice restoration going on. You know, talk about creating connections. Natawa Creek is the place this is happening at, okay? But I got to come back. I'm back on the main stem. I'm in the Mendon, just going up from Natawa Creek. And from there on up, I'm getting to, it's just the main stem. Honestly, we get to Union City. That's the last stop before we get to the start of the whole thing. Union City, named, I don't know if I'm making this up, named it because it's the union of the Coldwater and the St. Joe Rivers. And arguably, from that confluence to the end of the Coldwater River is arguably longer than the distance from that point to the start of the St. Joe River. So my old friend Bob Owens used to tell me that really the Coldwater should have been named the St. Joe River. And it's the St. Joe that stole that name from the Coldwater. Incredible things, big lakes. I grew up swimming in the headwaters of the Coldwater River. But we're back on the main stem, and we're finishing this up with a trip across I-69 over to Homer, Michigan, where the river kicks south to go to its start, goes through to Concha right there, and goes through Litchfield and Jonesville, and eventually to Hillsdale, to Bob East Lake in Hillsdale, where this whole thing starts. And then on the way, one last little connection that's been created recently, just upstream of Jonesville, we had a dam removal project, which we're going to hear more about these, but these are happening throughout the watershed. So I just wanted to sort of take that tour of the watershed narratively. I know I ate up a lot of time, and I hope that it wasn't painful for you all. I love doing it, and it just gives me a taste of not only where it's at, but what's happening out there in the way of creating connections. So with that, I'm going to move on to introduce my newest friend and an exciting addition to the St. Joe River Basin Commission. Kate, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself to folks. I'm going to stop and unmute myself.
All right, thank you, Matt. So hello, everyone. I'll try to make this short for Marcy to start at 10, but my name is Kate Barrett. I'm a recent biology PhD graduate from Notre Dame, and I'm an adjunct professor at Holy Cross College, and I recently joined the St. Joseph River Basin Commission as an aquatic ecologist. And so in the spirit of this theme that we have today of making connections, I thought it would be good to just give a bit of background of like how I joined this dynamic group. So basically after I graduated in January, I spent a few afternoons doing some professional inquiries, looking into getting involved in local water monitoring efforts. And I came across a report from the cities of South Bend, Elkhart Community Monitoring Program. And so I got in touch with Daragh Deegan, who then said, well, get in touch with St. Joseph River Basin Commission. It just kind of evolved from there. We had some really great, really positive interactions, and kind of the rest is history at this point. And so I'm really excited to be part of the effort to foster connections across the basin. And so because we're all here because we care about the basin's waters, I wanted to, in the 3 minutes I have, see how well I can do. I want to just briefly talk about a water monitoring program that we are developing that expands upon the existing South Bend Elkhart program to address fundamental questions of stream health throughout the basin. Basically asking how are our water resources doing? And so we in the water bodies that we interact with, we share dynamic linkages with each other. And so a question that we might ask is, how do our activities affect the ecosystem services that we enjoy, be it from ponds, wetlands, streams, tribs, etc. And so we can begin to ask this big question by studying the fundamental components of our water resources, being the tiny critters that reside at the very bottom of the water food web. I don't know if people can see, but I'm wearing this is a caddisfly necklace, so a representative critter that we can study to let us know how things are going. But that also includes such organisms as snails, clams, aquatic insects. And so as these critters reside at the very bottom of the food web, they are a reflection of the processes occurring in the surrounding landscape that have ripple effects affecting our water resources. And while these critters go largely unnoticed by us because they live under and on rocks, we share a wonderful similarity with them in that we both, us and these organisms, rely on a healthy supply of resources to be able to perform these ecosystem services that we enjoy. And so in this regard, we're going to be basically listening to these critters at several sites throughout the basin so that they can teach us about how the river is doing. So by studying their fundamental composition to look at what resources are entering various portions of the basin. And so I'm really excited to be a part of this effort and to be part of making these connections. So thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Thanks so much, Kate. I'm muting myself again because that feedback was going on, but I'm going to be turning it over to Marcy here. And as I do, obviously I'm super pumped up about Kate joining and us really getting a better sense of what's going on out there in the river. And so stay tuned for more on this. And I guess what, from a housekeeping side, technical side of things, if we could, it might be best to mute our videos at this point. I'm going to mute mine and move inside. Please remain muted on your audio, and we're going to turn it over to Marcy to hear about the Dowagiac River. So, and Marcy and Daragh, I apologize for not introducing you guys more. If you could tell us a little bit about yourselves to get started. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and I'm Marcy Hamilton. I'm with the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. We're kind of the sister agency to MACOG, which the St. Joe River Basin Commission is housed at the Michigan, on the Michigan side. We're in Southwest Michigan, obviously, by our name. So we cover 3 counties, Berrien, Cass, and Van Buren County, which are all in the St. Joe River Basin. And we're here down at the end of where it enters Lake Michigan. So Matt asked me, I've been working on watershed issues in Southwest Michigan for about 23 years, and actually started my career here in Michigan working on the Dowagiac River watershed. So it is obviously has a special place in my heart, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about it. So with that, I'm gonna share, it says that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. So I don't know if one of the co-hosts can turn the screen sharing on.
Marcy, I can help you with that. I am going to go ahead and just make you a co-host. That should work. It's being a little tricky for me right now.
Okay. You better hurry up. I'm eating into Dara's time, and he's going to be
I know, I'm so sorry.
I'll talk faster. I don't know.
Yeah, I think as a co-host, I must not have the power, and Matt is moving. I know, I'm so sorry. There he is.
I'm with you guys. Sorry, I'm going to try and figure out. So it's not letting you share.
Yeah, I think as a co-host, I must not have the power, and Matt is moving. I know. Oh, Matt, you must be on a lag too. Gosh, that's got to be so distracting for you. Yeah, I think as a co-host, I must not have.
Try it now, Mars. I don't know.
I know. Oh, Matt, you must be on a lag too. Gosh, that's got to be so distracting for you. Yeah, I think as a co-host, I must not have.
Try it now, Mars. I don't know.
No, it's not working. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So either need to change that or add me as a host, I'm guessing. No, it's not working.
I'm sorry. If Zach or Melissa want to try and call me on my cell, I don't know, Mars. I might have you. Can you start going without it? I'm sorry.
Marcy, here's another idea. Do you want to send me? I'm going to put my email in the chat, and you send it to me. I'll start getting it going, and then we'll try to figure out how to get you as a host, because it's not coming up for me.
Let me just get that up for you. Just a minute here.
Okay.
Oh, it's going to be huge. Let's see. Will you? Hopefully, you can get a large file.
Right.
Lots of pictures. All right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and start talking about the Dowagiac River. Of course, the first thing I have is not very helpful is a map to show in the watershed where we're at, but hopefully with Matt's virtual tour this morning, you understand that we're up in Michigan. We're one of the last tributaries to enter into the St. Joe River at Niles in Michigan. Most of the watershed is in Cass County, with a little bit up into Van Buren County and small portion on Berrien County. One thing about the Dowagiac River, it's probably one of the highest quality systems in the St. Joe River. It's known for its cold water system, and because of that, we have a lot of fish diversity.
Hey, Marcy, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. I think you can give it a try again and see if it'll work for you.
Let me spin it back here. Oh yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. All right.
No problem.
I'll just, so everybody can see that now, I assume, right? Okay. This is the map I was talking about with the Dowagiac River watershed here at the downstream end of the basin. And I was just going over the fish species that we're so lucky to have in this system because of the cold water, and several native species. Then of course we have the salmon species that come up from Lake Michigan and also brown trout. One exciting thing is historically there were lake sturgeon, and the Dowagiac River provided a lot of good spawning areas for them. So maybe someday we could see lake sturgeon come back. So we're talking about connections today. And so there were some pretty significant historic disconnections that happened in the Dowagiac River that really have impacted the river system. The one I want to talk, there's two I want to talk about. The first is the Pucker Street Dam. And this picture, historic picture here, shows actually the first, one of the first wooden dams that was built back in like 1828. And this is the current dam that was built after that in the early 1900s. And that wooden dam was removed. So that's a huge disconnection that separated the whole Dowagiac system from the St. Joe. And then the other one was back in the early 1900s, most of the Dowagiac River was channelized and drained to facilitate drainage of wetlands for agriculture. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. This is again the Dowagiac River where it enters the St. Joe down here in Niles. The Pucker Street Dam is only about 3 miles north upstream of where it enters the St. Joe River. So this dam cuts off over 159 miles of river and streams from the St. Joe. And back about 10 years ago, there was a study done paid by for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that ranked this dam as the #1 removal project in the St. Joe River Basin. So there's been interest in removing this dam for a long time. And back in this, it was a hydroelectric dam, so it generated power for the city of Niles. Stopped doing that in the late 80s, early 90s. And after that, it became pretty much obsolete. And so it started showing some stress. So the city decided, along with the DNR, to do a drawdown of the impoundment. This is the impoundment behind the dam. And this is it after the drawdown. You can see how the river started taking shape with the impoundment decreasing after that. One thing that happened with this drawdown is a lot of sand moved down into the lower river system, which is a really high quality fishing area. And so with that, the city had to put in an emergency sediment trap and try to get all that sediment out of there before it damaged the lower river anymore. So we learned a lot from that drawdown for actual dam removal. So not much happened between 1999 and early 2013 or so. The city actually tried to approach some companies to reinstate the dam to generate electricity, and nobody thought it was really feasible. So the city was left with this dam that's not operational, becoming a liability. The state is saying you either need to repair it or remove it. So back in 2013, the city started working to remove the dam. So here we are 7-8 years later. That's how long it took to get grants and secure funding and do the engineering and get permitting and all that stuff done to actually start the work in the winter of 2020. That's when we commenced the work to start removing the dam. And then this last year, we've been actually spending most of our time removing sediment to keep that lower stretch of the river healthy and safe, and then removing the dam. This summer and fall, the dam is pretty much gone now, and we're just finishing up restoration work. And then the city and their consultants will be doing monitoring for over 5 years after the dam removal. So here's just some pictures. This is the dam when it's intact. You can see the river upstream. This is Pucker Street here. This is after they removed that powerhouse. The dam is still intact. And then here's where most of the dam is being removed. obviously the whole powerhouse is removed. And you can see how this channel is starting to become more river-like instead of an impoundment. And that was really the whole goal, is to restore this river. So pretty exciting. If you have a chance to go out and look at the site, it's pretty stunning how it looks, and you can just see the transformation happening. So if we learned early on in 2013 when we started looking at this project, we thought just to remove this dam was probably going to cost, we thought maybe around $4 million. And once we got into the project and realized how much sediment had built up over the last 100+ years behind this dam, we realized we can't just remove this dam without managing the sediment and protecting the river downstream. So this project ended up costing, it's going to end up costing over $12 million. The city, I helped them get about $2 million in grant dollars from DNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Great Lakes Fisheries Trust. You can see the list there. But the majority of the funding, over $9 million, is coming from the City of Niles, either through a bond and a utility surcharge that they're putting on other utility customers' bills. So again, this is the area, here's the dam right here. This whole area upstream is full of all the sediment that's collected. And so the majority of the cost is getting rid of the sediment and pulling it out of the river so that it doesn't go downstream. And just to give you an idea of how much sediment we're talking about, I asked some of my engineer friends and my friend Grant Poole, who's from the Pokagon band, on here today to help us visualize how much sediment we've taken out of the river so far. And we're only at about 70% right now. So we've removed 188,000 cubic yards of sediment so far. And just to give you an idea how much that is, it's almost 19,000 dump trucks. It would fill 57 Olympic pools. It'd fill up 75,000 pickup truck loads. And if you can visualize a 10-story building on top of a football field, and that whole building full of sediment. So, and we're only at 70%, so we have more to go. But that's the biggest cost to the project, is removing all the sediment out of the river. So that's happening right now. If you go there, you'll see dump trucks just hauling sediment out of the river and placing them on the land around there. The last thing that will happen this fall, the summer this fall, is we're going to actually, where the dam site is, where the dam was removed, we'll be installing a rock riffle there, which they actually believe existed before the dam was built. And so that's to kind of control the elevation change, so we don't see more head cutting and more sediment moving down the river. So that's kind of the last piece of restoration that will happen. And what's cool is we're already hearing stories. Before, this dam was a total blockage to all passage of all fish and aquatic life. Since the dam was partially removed earlier this year, people have seen salmon all the way up in the headwaters up near Decatur. So the fish have found their way and are moving upstream. So that connection is pretty amazing. It reconnected, like I said, 159 miles of stream and river. So the next really exciting thing I want to talk about, this part isn't exciting. This was back in the late 1800s. There was a meeting of engineers, and we had this huge wetland. This map here is the St. Joe River Basin, with the red is showing where wetlands have been lost or drained. This big red blotch here is the headwaters of the Dowagiac up near Decatur. This is I-94 going here. So this swamp back in the late 1800s obviously was not viewed as anything special. They wanted to get rid of it so they could farm that land. So they put together a huge plan to dredge and straighten the Dowagiac River, pretty much from the headwaters all the way through Dowagiac, all the way down to almost to where the dam is being removed. So it's been a huge, huge undertaking to try to restore the meanders back into this river. And what's cool is this is an aerial photo, and here's the dredged river channel. And you can see these old, what we call meander scars, where the river used to be. They're still there on the landscape, but they're cut off from the river from when they dredged it. And this was the first meander restoration that was done up at Arthur Dodd Park in Cass County. This is what this meander right here, this is what it looked like. It was just, cut off, lots of algae. And now that it's been restored, it's beautiful. People fish it all the time. And what is really exciting is there was always a dream, because Dodd Park is down here, the south, is to restore all of these meanders. And you can see, so the blue is the current river, and all these red lines are the old meander scars that exist. So the Pokagon Band, Potawatomi Indians, have control over most of this land. It's their trust lands that they have. And they have been working over the last several years to put the meanders back into the river. And just found out yesterday that they actually got funding to do the restoration of these meanders up here by Peavine Street. So they're going to be restoring this stretch of river here, putting all these meanders back online into the Dowagiac. And then this yellow area that I have highlighted, they hope to do those meanders within the next 2 to 4 years when they get funding. So they just, like I said, just learned yesterday, they got funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to do this restoration work, and they hope to start it potentially this fall. So that's going to be, talk about connections. If we can connect all these meanders back into the river, and the habitat and the water quality, the way that the river flows will be greatly improved and restored. So this is just really exciting news. The other connection I want to talk about is water trails for canoeing and kayaking. There's a coordinated effort of partners to establish the Dowagiac River as a water trail. And so we have access sites that are highlighted here for people to put their boats in. And we have educational signage about the watershed and the river, and encouraging people to connect with the river by canoeing and kayaking. And fishing, of course, because there's great fishing in the Dowagiac. And what's exciting too is the city of Niles. This is the site where the dam is being removed, right here. Right now, this is what the current access site looks like at that property that the city owns. It's not very inviting. I can't believe people actually use it. It's pretty bad, and unfortunately causing a lot of erosion too. So the city just put in a grant to the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, to put in a new boat launch with paved parking. So that'll be a great addition to the water trail and for kayakers and canoeists. Oops, sorry about that. Just went a little far. The last thing I want to mention is our watershed management plan. These are plans that are written to understand what's going on in the watershed. As Matt said, what happens on the land is what affects the water quality and quantity. So these management plans looks at those and looks at what management practices we could be doing better on the landscape in terms of agriculture, in terms of what we do in our yards, how we develop land, and how we can do those in better ways to make sure we're protecting our water resources. And of course, the only way that happens is with the people in the watershed. So it takes the people working at agencies, takes the residents, the business owners to do these things to make sure that we're protecting our watershed. And then that is all I had. I think I'm leaving enough time for Daragh. And I just wanted to leave you with this quote I found from Wendell Berry. And I think it really talks about connections and their importance and why we're all here. And that's all I have. And I think we're saving questions to our end. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over.
Okay, hopefully you can all hear me. Oh gosh, Terrible feedback. I know it's crazy and I don't know what to do about it. I'm working around with my phone, but I just want to apologize to everyone. Marcy, you did an amazing job going with that. I figured out what happened. I never made you a co-host, so I take full responsibility for that. Yeah, shake your head, Daragh. It's totally deserved. I also want to apologize to everyone who's on the live stream, as well as those of you who are here. Marcy, because we'd interrupted you so many times already, I didn't want to say that you weren't in presenter mode. So we were, yeah, I mean, we were all still seeing your slides, but it was a little small. And so everyone on live stream, apologize for that. And thank you so much for winging with me. I'm working around with audio on my phone, and I'm going to stop and give it to Daragh. So thanks so much, Marcy.
So real quick, we're going to make these presentations available to people, so they'll be able to look at them, go back and look at it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Daragh, the floor is yours, and hopefully your screen share works and we can get you into presenter mode. So maybe one more click at we'll bring it to where the slide is full screen. Good, you got it.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Matt, thanks for the opportunity to speak this morning. I really appreciate it. My name is Daragh Deegan. Obviously, I work for the City of Elkhart as an aquatic biologist, and work for a program that's a combined program between the City of Elkhart and the City of South Bend to monitor fish communities and other organisms in the rivers and streams of Elkhart County. And we do it, as Kate mentioned earlier in her presentation, to kind of evaluate the health of our water and see how our St. Joe River is doing. It's kind of actually exciting for me today. I've got several people on the call that are instrumental in developing this program. Joe Foy, who is the stormwater coordinator with the city now, helped. He got the thing started, and then my supervisor Lynn Brayback's on the line, in addition to Gary Gillott. So we've got several people that were instrumental in getting our program going here today. So my presentation is going to focus primarily on the Elkhart River Dam. This is something that I've been working on for the last 10 years since I took the position with the City of Elkhart. So it's a pretty important project to me. It's a project that's a little bit farther ahead than Marcy. So Marcy, they're still kind of working on taking sediment out, and they still have to construct that riffle up on the Dowagiac. We pretty much got done with the hard work on our project early in 2020. And so, we're a little bit farther along. And also I've been doing some monitoring work on the Elkhart River to see the benefits of this dam removal for the organisms that live in it. So we've seen some pretty positive results. So my presentation is going to talk about the removal, but I'm also going to focus on some of those nice results we've seen as a result of the removal. So the Elkhart River Dam was an 8-foot tall, 150-foot wide lowhead dam located in downtown Elkhart. We were working with the Army Corps of Engineers to get this thing removed through a program that they operate, and they converted it. They hired a contractor to come in and convert that structure into a 4-foot tall, 150-foot long rock riffle. And similar to kind of what Marcy talked about, the rock riffle was needed to help with upstream scouring and helping with head cutting. We also have some bridges upstream that we were concerned that would be impacted from the removal. And so it was decided kind of at the last minute by the Army Corps to put in this rock riffle structure. But it's kind of worked out well. And I'll touch on that a little bit more here in a couple of minutes on why it's kind of worked out well in our situation. The idea here with the Army Corps was to create a structure that could pass fish. So far results are indicating that's worked pretty well. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Elkhart River, as Matt mentioned at the start of the program, it's the largest river that we have, or largest stream that we have, tributary stream to the St. Joe River. Similar to kind of Marcy's situation, we have this dam located really close to the confluence with the St. Joe, right here about a half mile upstream. And so right off the bat, you know, this thing was a significant ecological barrier, disrupting a connection between the St. Joe River and the Elkhart River. We have lots of migratory species, big river species that like to run up to into tributaries to spawn. And right off the bat, we have this barrier disrupting that connection. One of the other things I wanted to throw this slide in a little bit to kind of create some context for this project too. You'll see where the dam is located, highly urbanized area in our downtown. And you know, all these dams are different, and all these dam removal projects are different. They all have their unique challenges. But with this one kind of being in the downtown, we had a lot of stakeholders that were interested just from the perspective of it being in the downtown, and it's a highly visible landmark that's been around for a long time. So much so even that this road right here that parallels our river in the downtown is called Waterfall Drive. And so we removed the waterfall on Waterfall Drive. So I wanted to kind of throw this in to talk a little bit about the history of the dam. I didn't do a ton of go in depth and talk to historians about this dam. We weren't really able to find out much information on it, but we did get some clues on the history of it by looking at old maps. And this particular map is a Sanborn fire insurance map from 1885. The dam that we just removed is located in this general area. And in 1885, we had another dam that was located approximately 200 or 300 yards upstream of the dam we just took out. So this is not the first dam that we had on the Elkhart River in the downtown. Another interesting feature that kind of pops out with this map is this bend in the river, this horseshoe shape that we have right here. That was eliminated from the river. We took a 1/4 mile of the Elkhart River out back in somewhere between 1885 and 1889. So if you flash forward here to 1889, that whole bend, that 1/4 mile section is gone. We have another dam in place right here that's diverting water into a raceway that's no longer there also, but lots of different activities going on in the downtown prior to the 1900s. And then if we skip forward to 1910, we're able to see that our dam is in place. That's the dam we just removed. And it was put in to divert water into this raceway that's paralleling the Elkhart River. This raceway is no longer there. I'm not exactly sure when it was filled, but it was a long time ago, I know that. And you know, this dam has been sitting there idly, not really serving a purpose for many decades. So, you know, we had a non-functional, obsolete structure in the middle of the river. So this project was funded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers through a program that they call the Great Lakes Fisheries and Ecosystem Restoration Program. That's a mouthful. That program is funded through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that a lot of you are probably familiar with. Through this program, the Army Corps provides a 65% federal cost share towards a project. And then the local sponsor, in this case being the City of Elkhart, provided a 35% cost share towards the project. In this case, the Army Corps is like the overseer. And when they work in this program, they oversee the project. With a lot of federal grants, for those of you who deal with federal grants, oftentimes you get a check cut. When you get a grant, you get the check cut to you, and then you operate or oversee the project. In this case, we got those funds, we got the grant, but we cut the check to the Army Corps, and they did all the contracting, design of the project, and all those kinds of things. And so really, we were an important part of the project. Being the local sponsor, we had a lot of say in how things would look, but basically the ball dropped on the Army Corps, and they did most of the work. The total project cost was about $2.5 million. The construction costs, like construction and demolition of the dam, rounded out to about $1.9 million. So we had about $600,000 or so that the Corps spent on designs and studies and different things. Our cost share was about $700,000, but it was actually a little bit higher than that. We got a grant from the Indiana DNR through their Lake and River Enhancement Program to help cut that cost down a little bit. And then we also received some in-kind credits. Some of the monitoring work, for example, that I've been doing the last few years helped shave off some of those costs. And then we got some credits for some real estate that was impacted by the project. So the timeline that I have on here is pretty vague, just 4 bullet points on here. But one of the things that I wanted to emphasize with the timeline is just basically how long it took. And, in Marcy's case, she also mentioned it took a long time from start to finish to actually get anywhere with her project. But the initial conversation around this project started in 2007. The former city biologist, Len Kring, had a conversation with the Army Corps. He was aware of, the dam and its potential impacts. And so he talked to the Army Corps about potential fish passage around that dam. They got together in about 2009 and did some fish surveys above and below the dam. And at the time, they found a significant disparity in the number of species above and below, with 45 species being below the dam and about 30 species being on the top side. And then in about 2012, they started doing feasibility study work where they were looking at the best alternatives to pass fish around the dam. Some of the things that they looked at were like the rock riffle that we just put in. They looked at full dam removal, ideas like a bypass channel and some different things. But they also started looking at things like how the dam would affect floodplain, like a dam removal might affect floodplains, or how the dam affects the hydrology in the river. Also studied the potential for sediment and contaminated sediment behind the dam. And then also looked at the structural integrity of the dam to see what kind of shape it was in. So, roughly 13 years of talking about this thing before it came out. It took a heck of a long time. So I wanted to throw this picture in to kind of demonstrate the big kind of signature issue that we had with the dam. And the main reason why it came out. During the Army Corps' work, they hired some contractors to go out and look at the structural integrity of the dam. This is a couple of guys that are out there with a drill rig, and they're boring down into the dam. And they determined a couple things. The first thing was that the dam was constructed of river rocks. So back in the early 1900s, they basically just stacked up a bunch of river rocks and they put concrete on top of it, which is really interesting. And that was the dam. They basically just built a wall out of material from the river. And they also found that the dam itself was in pretty bad shape. So there was significant voids in it. Water was penetrating right through the dam. It was like seeping right through it. And then on the waterfall drive side of the dam, there was no actual structural material behind it. It was basically just a concrete cap kind of holding it together at the time. So basically we were sitting on a big liability. At some point, this thing's going to fall in. We talked to the mayor at the time and the city council, and we were faced with this decision. We can work with the Army Corps right now, get a grant to help us remove the dam, or we can sit and wait and let this thing fail. And in the future, we have potentially 5 or 6 times that cost that we're getting from the Corps to try and rebuild or replace this thing. And so the most feasible approach that we had at the time was to take the dam out. Another really kind of timely thing that occurred with this dam removal was towards the late 2010s, the city of Elkhart started to kind of really focus on the downtown, and they started to implement this project called the Elkhart River District Plan. This is a public and private partnership that's put in about upwards of $150 million into our downtown. We've just put in a huge state-of-the-art swimming facility called our Aquatic Center. We have hundreds of residential units that have gone in, and then lots of retail spaces that have gone in. And the goal there, obviously is to attract people to the downtown, and the leadership working on this plan also recognize that our rivers play a really important part of attracting people to the downtown. And so this was kind of tied in, the idea of connecting people with the river, getting more paddlers out on the river, people that are able to kind of canoe and kayak down through that old section of river was something that was tied in. And just in the last few months, we put a canoe launch just a few hundred yards upstream of the former dam. All right, so let's talk about dam removal. So in February 2020, the Army Corps' contractor came in to remove the dam. This is kind of a cool shot. This is the initial breach, and it was actually a pretty exciting day for us in Elkhart when they were coming in to do this. We had lots of people out there checking it out. We had the media out there, taking pictures and whatnot. But at the time, the river was flowing really high. I think there was about 700 million gallons of water flowing through the Elkhart River on the day that they initially breached this thing. And the average flow in the Elkhart River is about 300 million gallons a day. So we're roughly double the average of water flowing through it. And the contractor's initial idea was to go in on the downstream side. And you can see here, they started kind of building this platform to help them get out into the river. But they realized that quickly that the river was just way too high and deep for them to go in on the downstream side. So they constructed a rock platform on the top side to get them out there. The other thing that's kind of interesting in this picture is you see there's the head on the excavator that they have is like a grinding wheel. Oftentimes with these dam removals, the excavators will have like a jackhammer head that they use to kind of whack away at the dam and chip it away. And oftentimes in these dam removals, they can drop the pool behind the dam, in a day. I mean, in a few hours, you start seeing the water drop and that kind of thing. In our case, it took like a week. And a lot of that was because the contractor was really scared of, potentially causing a breach because of the structural integrity issues with this thing. The fact they were on the upstream side of it, they wanted to be really careful about, kind of just slowly going at it and not causing a big issue with a failure. And as I mentioned, there was a lot of excitement. I was pretty fired up about this thing coming out. We had about 50 people out there in the media. And it was really a buzzkill. I mean, just it took a long time for this thing to drop. And we even, our former city engineer, Mike Macklin, who's on the call today, was quoted in the Elkhart Truth as saying something like, this was the equivalent of watching paint dry. Like, it was just a really kind of lame initial breach, even though, after a week or so, we started seeing results. I have a couple of more shots in here, just kind of showing the initial breach. And some of these images are kind of really cool, seeing that excavator out there. One thing that was interesting that I found really interesting with the dam removal was people with drones came out of the woodwork. Drones are getting really popular these days. So I think we had about 4 or 5 people flying drones around, some of the people that I work with, and we got some really cool shots of the dam coming out and some cool videos with the dam coming out with drones. But this picture shows that platform that they built on the upstream side of the dam. And this worked out really well for the contractor. They were able to use that rock to build their platform. But after the dam came out, they were able to use it to construct the riffle and fill in the voids on the downstream side. Another thing that worked out really well for the contractor too is the dam itself, as I mentioned, was constructed of river rock. And you can kind of see it here in this picture. They just had a little bit of concrete poured on top to kind of hold it all in place. But after they tore that concrete off, they were able to use all that river rock to help kind of build that riffle also. So that was pretty nice. So this is an image, another drone shot of what the river looked like after the dam came out. There's a couple things that I want to show in this picture. The first thing is we had this other riffle emerge about 300 or 400 yards on the upstream side. I keep talking about these riffles. For those of you who aren't familiar with stream habitat, riffles are those areas that are pretty shallow. You've got water breaking. You tend to see white water. There's a lot of rock material in there. And from a stream quality or habitat perspective, they're probably one of the most ecologically diverse sections of the river or types of habitat in a river. You've got lots of rocks for critters to hide. You've got breaking water that's putting a lot of oxygen in the water. So seeing this right off the bat was really exciting. We saw, seeing that habitat emerge as soon as the dam came out was really cool. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is, Marcy talked a lot about with the Dowagiac, all the sediment that they had to deal with, truckloads, right? There's a couple of different ways to do dam removals, and one of them is and it's needed, you have to take an active approach in managing the sediment. If you have a lot of sediment behind there could be impacts downstream. In our case, we really didn't have a whole lot of sediment behind the dam, and all the testing that we did behind the dam revealed no contaminated sediment. And so all the sediment that we've really had to deal with for this project is this silt bar, this mucky stuff on the side here. The Corps contractor came in and stabilized that. They put in native plants. They're continuing to monitor those native plants, but that's really all the work that we've had to do for this project. And it's mostly been a passive approach with sediment management. This sandbar that's right here, that emerged pretty quickly too, but you know, we looked at that as being like the inside bend of the river where sands like to deposit anyway. So this is an area where the sands have shifted and they continue to kind of deposit here and whatnot. So it's been, you know, pretty cool to see how the river shaped upstream, and we've taken this kind of passive approach with sediment. I do expect, like, over the next few years, you know, we'll have flood events and pulse events. A lot of the sediment that's upstream will work its way through the system. But, you know, we do, just based on the nature of the Elkhart River in our downtown and the size of the dam, I believe that a lot of that sediment was blown over the dam anyway. Within the last mile of the Elkhart River, it drops about 15 feet before it hits the St. Joe. So, you know, a lot of, and based on the size of the dam, the water's funneling through there really quick, and it can, you know, just push the sediment downstream. So this is what the final product pretty much looked like. This is about May or June of 2020. A couple of things to point out in this. First is that, you know, I talked about the idea of kayak passage and connecting folks that want to get down the river in their boats to the St. Joe River. So this is, we've had a couple of kind of little channels put in here, more of a passive channel on this side for those that are inexperienced, and then one that's a little bit more fun right here for more experienced paddlers. But this thing was kind of designed with the intent, obviously it was designed with the intent to pass fish. So we have all these kind of rocks that were randomly placed, but definitely placed in the strategic fashion, so that as fish are kind of working their way through the riffle, they're able to stop and take a rest and whatnot. The other thing that I wanted to kind of throw in here too, and I had mentioned this at the start, we took the waterfall out on Waterfall Drive. And, you know, initially as we were working through this, we weren't really excited about the fact that we were putting this riffle in. We were led to believe by the Army Corps that this was going to be a full dam removal. But after listening to some of the stakeholders in the downtown, you know, people, and the fact that we just removed our waterfall, people, you know, liked that landmark being there. They liked the fact that there was breaking water. The dam provided somewhat of like a white water aesthetic. It provided like a sound, a nice bubbling sound. And so this feature, this riffle feature, kind of tends to hit on some of those things. And I definitely think it helped appease some of those stakeholders that were concerned about the dam being removed. So this slide, this picture I wanted to throw in just to kind of talk a little bit about the impoundment that was behind this dam. As I mentioned before, the last mile or so, the river drops about 10 or 15 feet. It's very steep before it hits the St. Joe River Valley. And so this red line here depicts the impoundment. We didn't really have to deal with any significant stakeholders on the upstream side of the dam. So like if you think about removing a dam on the St. Joe, you've got these big wide impoundments with a lot of houses on it. You know, and really nice homes, and then you've got a lot of recreational activities that take place. Really, we didn't have to deal with any of that. There's one like small apartment complex on the upstream side, and just based on the small size of this impoundment, we didn't have to deal with those concerns. There are some folks that are way upstream by Oxbow Park, which is about 10 miles upstream, that are concerned that the dam removals influenced the river flow up that far. However, we've had a drought here for the last year, and so I think some of those people are thinking that the dam removal actually impacted the river that far up, but it's actually just because the river has been in drought conditions. So the riffle I had talked about before, I wanted to throw that in and kind of show where that riffle emerged a couple hundred yards upstream. Guess what that's associated with? So this this blue line here is that old river channel that we took out, that quarter-mile of river. So this, in a way, this riffle really is kind of artificial. Basically, this is the chunk of river we took out to take that meander out of the river back in the late 1800s. And it's super steep right here because we're dropping that elevation over 200 feet that used to be dropped over a quarter mile, if that makes sense. We also had a couple of other riffles emerge, one about another quarter mile upstream, and then one right towards the end of the impoundment. And these are really nice areas. I suspect that as more sediment moves through, these riffles are just going to get nicer and nicer and attract more species and aquatic organisms. All right, so let's talk about fish. This is the exciting stuff for me. So we did quite a bit of survey work, actually a ton of survey work around this dam. Len Kring, who's the former city biologist pictured here, went in 2009 with another biologist from the Army Corps and did some surveys above and below the dam. He's got a big muskie here that he collected below the dam. And our methods have been using electrofishing. So we do electrofishing surveys to capture the fish. And then I've also done follow-up surveys in 2018, 2019, right before the dam came out to check out species numbers. As I mentioned at the time, Len had documented a significant disparity in the number of species above and below. And then in 2018 and 2019, I was able to kind of reel that in a little bit and get more concrete numbers on the species that were absent from the upstream side. And then in the summer of 2020, last year, after the dam came out, just a few months after the dam came out, I went in and did like a post-removal survey to see if I could find new species and changes to the river upstream. So this is a map of our sample sites in 2020. You see here, these two green dots here above and below the former dam. These three sites right here, American Park, Studebaker Park, and County Road 18 are part of our long-term monitoring network. These are samples that we've been sampling since sites we've been sampling since 1998. So we have a ton of data on fish species at these three sites. We also did a little bit of sampling at Oxbow Park about 10 miles upstream. We were actually looking for fish tissue samples, but we encountered a new species there. And then in about August of 2020, we went all the way up into Goshen, about 20 miles upstream, just downstream of the Goshen Dam, to see if we could find any new species up in Goshen. And so based on our initial surveys prior to the removal, we had determined that there was about 10 species or so that were completely absent from the upstream side. Channel catfish, this guy right here being the big game species that was missing from the upstream side. We also had two darter species, the log perch and the greenside darter, indicators of good water quality that were missing from that upstream side. Two gar species, this is a spotted gar right here, but we also had the long-nosed gar that was absent from the upstream side. And then four sucker species, indicators of good water quality, with three of them being red horse. This is a shorthead red horse, but three species of red horse that were missing from that upstream side. And then we also had another 8 species or so where they were pretty much absent from the upstream side. We only had maybe 1 or 2 records, and we've been sampling the Elkhart River, like I mentioned before, for about 20 years. So, in all the surveys we've done, we've only encountered just a couple of records of these species on the upstream side. But when we look at the downstream side, they're in high abundance. Probably the most prominent species is the muskie, fairly abundant on the downstream side of the dam. And then one of our bigger red horse species, this river red horse, just an incredible specimen. These guys were pretty much absent from the upstream side. And I think we found maybe 1 or 2 of these over the years prior to the removal, and I think that these guys, being such powerful fish, a couple of them were actually able to jump the dam, and that's why we found them. And then we had some other smaller species that were also kind of in really low numbers on that upstream side. We also had several species that we found both upstream and downstream of the dam, but definitely we're encouraged that the removal is going to benefit these species, particularly because some of them are really vulnerable. Our greater red horse, which is a state endangered species, we found above and below the dam in decent numbers prior to the removal. But one of the things with dam removals that's really important to remember is that we have a dam in place that's disrupting a connection between the upstream and the downstream side. And so we have isolated populations of organisms. And so the idea of removing that dam, we're able to reconnect those populations and help widen the gene pool, if you will. So, and that's particularly important when we're talking about vulnerable species like our greater red horse and some of our threatened species. We also had a couple of threatened species, the northern brook lamprey and the long-nosed dace. And the long-nosed dace was one that we were particularly interested in because They're a riffle specialist. They like really swift current. And so we're kind of hoping to see that some of these show up on those upstream riffles after the dam came out. And then if you know anything about the St. Joe River, you know that we've got some really important game fisheries on the St. Joe, the smallmouth bass, walleye, and northern pike. And obviously the dam removal is helping reconnect those populations and helping their populations with their gene pools too. All right, let's talk about some results. So this is a table depicting fish that we collected, new species we collected upstream of the dam following the removal. The top row here is the sites on the upstream side. This next row here with the purple font is the distance those sites are from the former dam. And then all these are the species records that we collected following the dam removal. The channel catfish, that game species I talked about, in 2020, we were finding this thing about 7 miles upstream of the dam, which is pretty awesome. But we also found 3 species as far as 20 miles or 18 miles upstream in Goshen at Shanklin Park. And a couple of them really impressive are just little guys. So this mimic shiner, average size maybe about 1.5 to 2 inches long. And then the log perch maybe about 4 to 5 inches on average. Just little swimmers had made it in abundance about 18 miles upstream following the dam removal. So rapid recolonization of species in that first year, which is really impressive. We also did, as I mentioned before, these surveys directly above and directly below the dam. This is data from 2018. And when we do our fish surveys, we use this tool called the Index of Biotic Integrity. The acronym for that is IBI. The IBI is a system that evaluates essentially the health of the fish community based on a number of factors like species numbers, sensitive species, tolerant species, some of the things that they eat and that kind of thing. And there's all these complex calculations that essentially go into this thing. But the output of the IBI is really cool. It's a score of 0 to 60. And so we have this complex information that we're able to share with the public and provide a score that tells you about the health of that fish community. Prior to the removal in 2018, the IBI score on the upstream side was 45. On the downstream side, it's 51. So definitely a higher score on the upstream side. And actually 51 out of 60 is a really good score. So downstream side looking really good. But if we start looking at the species above versus species below, the numbers are really drastically different. Species above 23 versus 42 below. And then some of these categories of sensitive fish like darters, suckers, and sensitive species, way lower on the upstream side relative to the downstream side. And then in addition to looking at fish, we also evaluated the habitat using a similar kind of mechanism as the IBI, where we score the habitat out of 100. On the upstream side, we had a score of 52 out of 100. On the downstream side, we had a habitat score of 78. I'm not going to present 2019 data because it's kind of redundant. It's the same kind of results as 2018. But if we skip forward to 2020, we can see the results completely change. Our IBI score on the upstream side is 54, which was better on the downstream side. Our number of species is 43 compared to 42 on the downstream side. And our number of darters, suckers, and sensitive species is also higher on the upstream side compared to the downstream side of the dam. And then our habitat score, 79 out of 100, which is almost the same as 81 out of 100. So things really improved, obviously, on the upstream side, which is great. And we didn't do any psychological evaluations of our fish species, but you can see in 2018, those fish were in a really bad mood. They were all kind of frowny faced and grouchy. But after we pull that dam out, the fish seemed like they were really liking it. All right, last technical slide that I have to show here. This is a graph of our 3 long-term monitoring sites on the upstream side. The horizontal axes here, that's the dates that we sample these sites, starting back in 1998 all the way up to 2020. The blue line is those IBI scores that I mentioned before, and the orange line is the number of species. You can see that, I mean, scores are kind of similar over time, but you can see in 2020, all 3 of those sites had IBI scores that were the highest ever. And then our species numbers are crushing it in 2020, the highest number of species we've ever seen at any of those sites. In general, that they were trending upwards anyway. I think that we've had some water quality improvements across the board in our watershed in the last few years, so things are getting better. But 2020, that boost that we got from the dam removal really pushed those numbers over the edge. Just a couple of other quick notes here to point out. Our program tags smallmouth bass on the St. Joe. That's this little white thing in the back of the fish here that has a number that's individual to the fish that we tag. We collected right off the bat in 2020, we collected a fish that had migrated 4 miles out of the St. Joe up into the Elkhart River. That long-nosed dace, that threatened species that I was talking about a few minutes ago, the riffle specialist, we found those in abundance on the riffles on the upstream side of the dam following its removal, which was really cool. Just in conclusion here, our results obviously from 2020 are pretty promising. I do recognize that the river still has a lot of work to do. I mentioned in my presentation that we've really been in drought here for the last year, and we're kind of depending on those pulse events to push some of that sediment downstream and shape the river through our passive sediment management approach. So things will shift over time, but then the fish species also have a lot of work to do. So, here in the next couple of years, I'll be doing follow-up surveys, and hopefully we see even more positive results occur. All right, so with that, lots of people to acknowledge. I mean, with some of these things, it takes a village, and I'm not going to go ahead and name everyone, but you can see them on here. Lots of people involved in trying to get this thing done. And certainly without any of these players, this thing wouldn't have come to fruition. So that's all I've got. Certainly appreciate your time. And Matt, I think I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Daragh. That was awesome. I got crazy audio stuff going, so I'm going to keep myself muted as much as I can. But I did really appreciate the numbers at the end there. That's just incredible that you're seeing results that quickly. So one thing that I'm going to mention before I remute myself is we did get one question. I think you might have touched on this early on, Daragh, but Adam Bowden was asking about the ownership of the dam. When you look back in the historical records, do you know if that dam was built by the city or whether it was private?
Yeah, it was actually kind of a tricky situation. That's one of the lots of different things kind of popped up during this process. And Laura, who's on the call today, can with the city kind of help me through this process too. But that dam was actually privately owned, and up until about 10 years before we removed it, it was still privately owned. And so we had to go through a process. I don't remember all the technicalities, but we had to go through a legal process of acquiring that. The owner couldn't be found, and so the city went through a process of acquiring it so that we could take ownership and make sure it was managed properly.
Great, thank you. We are really close to 11. Wrap it up. I didn't see any other questions come through, but I'm going to pause for a second in case one of the other co-hosts did. I'll stop for just a second. I guess I got to thank you, Daragh, Marcy, Kate, Melissa DeSimone was incredible on helping me with the technical stuff. Zach Drips back there at MACOG. Thank you to St. Joe River Basin Commission for letting us do this. And I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. And with that, I think I will say thank you and hope to see you in person next year. Thanks, everybody.